Right, yeah. So like, you should check out that Tim Pierce thing, his latest one. Something like I can't remember the clickbaity title that he put on it, but it's the one he released today. And it's a great talk about how you know using your triads to visualize the neck is really the best way of getting your parts together, and it's really the best way of making things sound tied into the music. Um, so yeah, so on to today's lesson. What we're going to do is take a look at that same chord progression. So what you all might need to do real quick is, do I have it written out in this lesson? See, my problem is that I relied on you guys to actually do some homework. Yeah, I mean, at the bottom of the lesson on the last page, there is all of these chords in kind of block chords. Um, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I learnt the simplified version that you made with the C#7 flat 9 and all that.
The simplified on the last sheet.
The first one on the new sheet.
Right.
Like
Well, I mean, look, what's really going to help is to have a familiarity around with these chords. So, just a quick recap. So, start here, may as well. So E major 7 will be this little shape here, 9, 8, 9. And then we're going to go to B minor 7, which is going to be based off the 7th fret B minor chord. So we're going to get 9, 7. If you want to put the 7 on top, we get 10. Otherwise, it'd be 9, 7, 7. E7. If you want E7 flat 9, you'd have to do that shape, which is 6, 7, 6. Then we get to A major 7. To A minor major 7. So it's just flattening the third in that instance. So we start with 6, 6, 5, 5, and then 6, 5, 5, 5. So if we look down, we'll just start with that first 4 notes. Part of the idea of working through a chord progression like this, and working through any chord progression that really, really asks you to focus on the chords. So a lot of the time that's pop music too. But it can be a cute little way of practicing to kind of practice thinking about your chord tones to limit yourself in lots of different ways. So if you look down to the first section of tab we've got there, I've given about 3 to 4 notes per chord, right? So E major 7, we get these ones. B minor 7. E7 flat 9. A major 7. A minor major 7. Right? So what to do with this? Well, they are your chord tones, right? You can write melodies just with that, and it will sound like the song. Right? A lot of the time, I think people get confused improvising, especially when you hand them a scale, that they want to play all the notes. Whereas just boiling down your options to only a few is a great place to start. Yeah, just like that. Boiling your options down to just a few is a great place to start, because in many ways it gets you to focus on the right things. It gets you to focus on the sound, which is the most important thing that we forget to focus on all the time. Even when you're practicing like playing blues or whatever, you should think to yourself every now and then whilst you're playing, what does that note sound like when I bend it? Test yourself all the time. I think what you'll find most of the time is that your fingers are kind of on autopilot and you're not really predicting your lines with your ear. So focusing in on just a few options means that you can memorize them quickly and then play around with them. So just beneath that, obviously I've written it out for every chord in the song. for one cycle. If you come down to the second page, the beginning of the second page starts with a melody that I came up with when I was writing the sheet out. I didn't take too much time on it, but I used a couple of constraints like few notes per chord, and also always moving in quarter notes. I don't know if you guys have ever tried that. It's a jazz practice technique where you just relentlessly improvise on a particular subdivision. And part of the reason for that is it takes away the burden of having to think about your phrases, and all you have to think about is the sound of your lines and where the notes come from. It does not necessarily make the best music, because obviously that repetition can be boring, but it is a fantastic tool for you to put pressure on yourself, for you to learn the neck. So the melody that I came up with is like this. All right, so everyone take a quick play of it. It would be really, really cool to hear the chords underneath it as well. So I don't know, anyone reckon they could sight read that at like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4? Because if you can, I'll play the chords underneath you, and you can kind of fly read the tab. It's all in crotchets, so it's just one after the other. You just got to kind of follow it. So ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, All right, who kept up? Anyone make it all the way? Yeah. Okay, so the things to think about, right? We were talking about what makes something a melody, and why this example works. So a bit of melodic analysis. So do we all agree like that sounded pretty musical? Yeah. So why did it sound musical? Well, melodies have certain features that you've got to emulate as you improvise. Most of the time it's done subconsciously, and you will do a lot of this subconsciously, but part of what you need to do is hit it intentionally when you practice. All right, little things like if you kind of offer yourself an idea, repeat it twice. All right, like at least twice. Really, it's called motovic development, right? You take an idea and you develop it a little bit. So for starters, melodic analysis, they're all chord tones, with the exception of the third note in the A minor major 7 bar. That's a sixth, so it's technically not a chord tone. I mean, depending on how you want to define chord tones, it would be an extension for sure. But it's a very strong melody because of that, because it's always tying in directly to the chords. It sounds like it fits, especially when the chords are playing. Okay, voice leading. There is a ton of voice leading that I kind of came up with. The first one, obviously, is in this. Right, I used the major 7 there as one of the most dissonant notes in that opening bar. Well, actually, the only dissonant note in that opening bar. To voice lead down to the third of the B minor, right? Part of getting used to this is thinking about where you're going. So you've got to, while you're sitting here cycling around, you've got to be thinking, I'm going to B minor. So one of these notes has to go to one of the notes from this B minor chord. I could have done different things, like right? because then I was using the third to voice lead up to the 10 of the B minor, sorry, the 7th of the B minor. All right. A good place to aim for is any time where there is a chromatic gap between two of the notes between two chords. So just like the major 7th here to the 3rd of B minor, right? Major 7, 3rd, they're only a semitone apart. Same up here, 3rd of the E chord up to the flat 7 of the B minor. Right? They make very, very powerful notes to choose because they're very close to one another, because they sound very different. And often it would be notes that sound really awful against the chord you're on. You know, if I have an E major 7, and I also put into that the flat 7, that's a pretty spicy sound, right? Which is why we can't hit this B flat, this B flat, this note until the B minor hits, right? Otherwise it'll sound really, really dodgy. Okay, so second bar, we've got the note A, 7th B minor. It falls down to the G sharp. So we're doing this thing, right? If I didn't choose that, if I went to a different note, it might sound awkward. Right? That's okay. But the other one sounded like it kind of glued together more. Right? It's like as soon as we heard this note, we could kind of predict where that line was going. We know we're heading to A. Flat 9, really spicy before the resolution to A. Right? Which is indicative in the chords. These chords are just build-up chords to A. You know, like we could have removed that entire bar and just kept playing E effectively. So what's the original? It's not the that excites me, that thrills and delights me, right? So like that 2-5 is where we're pretending to go to A, and why do we include that 2-5? Because it creates a bunch of tension that makes the resolution to A feel better. So part of it is listening to your chords. If you hear the chords ratcheting up tension, it's a good place for you to do it too. And you might want to use something spicier when you do it. Yeah, I mean, you can see a whole bunch of them here. Bar 2, the last note, F natural, falls to the flat 9. So flat 9. So the F natural here falls to the E, the 5th from the A major 7. A really interesting thing to do actually on the minor 7 would be to play it as a minor 7. You know, the note sounds quite wrong because it's going to be the minor 3rd of E, but it voice leads back to the major 3rd really well. So if we had something like, right? So that's the A major, A minor, resolving into E again. The reason why that's slightly dangerous to use is that as soon as you've announced that minor 3rd, you've got to resolve it. So you've got to listen to what the notes are telling you to do. If I have this, again, it's okay, but it's kind of like, why was I ratcheting the tension there unless it's going to pay off for some reason? Right? So sometimes it's just about listening more, listening to the things you suggested to yourself when you play. Which is another reason why doing an exercise like this, where you slow down, where you only do crotchets, or even less, like you could choose 2 notes per chord and do them in minutes. And each one of those chords, each one of those notes has to pay off, and they have to lead somewhere, create some kind of tension, send you somewhere. So the mistake that we all make is not listening to that. All right, so another melodic trick. So that was voice leading, right? So anytime you hear something that pushes you to another note, you want to try to follow that suggestion. Melodic mirroring. So without checking out the sheet, can anyone spot any melodic mirroring? So if you just go, don't cheat and read it off the sheet. But if you look at the chords, can you see anything in the melody that repeats shapes? And by that, I mean just look at like the dot graph that the music is drawing. And we should see things that look similar to one another. Anyone catch anything?
Well, I mean, even just the first two phrases are similar
Yeah,
in
right. Like,
in contour, and then the next two are somewhat similar.
yeah, with a minor variation at the end.
Yeah.
But that variation leads you into the next bar, and the minor major 7 bar and the E major 7 bar are also pretty much the same shape, right? And you can see how they have a lot of this kind of like, I've got 2 bars that do this kind of hump, then 2 that do this staggery thing, or one does a stagger, and then the other one does like half a stagger and then leads up, stagger down, lead up, scoop down and up, scoop down and up, scoop down and up, right? It's really easy to see in music. It's really easy to hear with your ears. It's kind of weird when you're thinking about playing it, right? Like, the best way I can describe thinking about playing it is that once you play a couple of things, you want 2 bars to sound similar. What you want to try to avoid are non sequiturs. And guitarists are great at doing that, where you've got a whole bunch of canon licks. So you play something that sounds cool, and you're like, oh, okay, it's been 30 seconds since I've shred, so... And it just doesn't really match with whatever you're doing. So it's really important to think about what everything sounded like and respond, right? It's kind of like playing call and response with yourself. Simple forms are great for this. It's really great to practice that kind of idea with blues. It's really cool to take almost identical ideas and just transpose them by chord, even if you don't transpose them to the same interval in the chord. Like you might have something like, that's 2 bars in like blues change. Stealing the rhythmic feature, and it's kind of got this seesawing motion between 2 intervals in the chords. It doesn't matter that one of them is the root and the third, and the other one is the 7th and the 5th. In fact, it kind of helps because it kind of establishes an A pedal tone, right? But I stole the rhythm, and I also stole the general gist of the line to apply it to the next chord. You can do this with contrast too, but the contrast still has to sound logical. That really must be like a call and response, like right? Like each one of those lines has to have a kind of an answer to right? Like you got to think more and more about these things as you practice, which is why restricting your note choices is a good way of doing it, right? Like if you've only got 3 notes to deal with on each chord, it's really easy to think about the shape of the line, So you can hear like all I'm doing there is for the first 4 chords, first 5 chords, I practiced exactly the same line. Then on the next chords, I started doing the same kind of a different kind of line. Okay, so like things we could do to make this melody better. Anyone got any suggestions? I got a few. So if this was a jumping off point for you, and you had to take this, like one of those writing exercises I used to hate in like high school. Here's the start of the story. Elaborate on this story. What would you do with it? All right? No ideas? Like I'd start by not using crotchets. All right, like phrasing would be great. This has a kind of a relentless thing, and that can be kind of cool. You will hear that in like bop and jazz sometimes, especially in bebop. Like they'll just do lines and lines and lines and lines and lines at the same subdivision. But adding some kind of phrasing. So like a good exercise to do for your own practice would be to take the solo and play with it a little bit, right? Play with the timing. put a bit of swing into it, put in some grace notes, change a couple of the notes around, that kind of thing, right? The other thing you could do is treat these as guide tones and support it with your scales. So has anyone tried playing over this yet? So like knocking up a backing track or putting a loop together or finding any of the million versions of it online? Yep. Okay, well, that's some pretty easy homework to do. Like, write that shit down. I'm pretty sure there's one. I'll just have a quick look for it. There's one jazz standards backing tracks people that do a pretty good job. It's got a massive green background, I think. Wow. Yeah, learnjazzstandards.com. I think they do it in a different key. Yeah, and like a super jazzy feel. Yeah, so they're doing it in F. But like, key changing F is pretty easy to just move up one fret. Those people are pretty good for putting together some very trad jazzy sounding backing tracks, and they're always a good thing to push yourself with. Quite often they can kind of throw you for a bit of a loop from kind of what you're expecting from other backgrounds. They can sound super sparse. So it's a cool thing to do a bit of practice with. All right, so if we're not using these chord tones, right, we could look at using scales. And one of the problems with using scales, I think, is that they're really, really large blocks of data for you to move around. Unless you visualize all your scales in one octave, which I never got around to doing. I still kind of see my scales as a total network across the whole neck. And we get some other problems too, like we can't just say play in E. I mean, I'm sure you can. If you choose the right notes at the right time, that's all fine. But there are multiple places here where we kind of break the key signature. So if we're kind of doing this thing where we shift in and out of chords that are diatonic, then we're going to have to shift scales quite a lot. So if you, I think it's the last page, yeah. On the last page, if we have a look at what we've got here, every time we have a 2-5, I'm essentially using Dorian. So, and I don't know if you guys have noticed that one of the obvious points about why you might do that is because if you think about all the notes in each of these chords, they make Dorian. All right. Why? I mean, like, the obvious reason of why is that, Ionian would be major, right? So the 2 is going to naturally fall on the start of Dorian. Now, you still have to focus in on your chord tones while you're doing that. So we might start Ionian. Right? The other problem with it is it's going to sound you're going to avoid using certain tensions that you could use. It's a good place to be at, depending on where you're at in your own playing. It's definitely worth the time to practice things like this, where you go over a chord chart and you think, right, I'm going to play E Ionian here, I'm going to play B Dorian here, and then this here and that here. And actually, A would probably be cool to play A Lydian instead of A Ionian, because, Lydian lines up better into the key of E. A Lydian is the same as E Ionian. But I think the thing that we're all going to fall into again is if we get all these many note choices, it's really, really likely that we'll try to play all of them. So you've got to still view your chord tones first, right? And then apply your scale around that. You know, that would be fine because I hit mostly chord tones. I hit the strong notes on downbeat. Whereas just doesn't matter how cool the line is or how fast it is, it's still going to sound off unless you hit specific chord tones at specific times. Yeah, and other things too, like when we hit A minor, I've written that down as A Dorian again. Dorian's a nice default, by the way. If you've ever got a minor 7 chord, Dorian's pretty good playable. Usually. I mean, there are some problems. Like if you look at the last 25251 set, G sharp minor to C7, right? Playing Dorian means that we're going to include this note, right? This B flat. And that's going to be really, really very tense. It's the flat 5 of E. So it's quite tense in this key. So it's kind of an avoid tone. You probably wouldn't play it at all if you were thinking in chord tones, but if you're thinking in scales, your finger will kind of naturally go there. And it can work provided you resolve out of it okay, but it's definitely a difficult note to make work. That can sound cool though, because like part of a lot of the coolest sounds are people who are using notes that are kind of outside the scale, or they're reinterpreting the function of this chord and justifying other notes in them. Like I really like flat nines. I think flat nines sound really cool on a lot of dominant chords and augmented fifths. And sometimes you do that even when the key signature doesn't tell you to do that. It's just there because it's ratcheting tension. Well, similarly, that ninth, which should be a flat 9 in this key, minor flat 9, but on the second cycle with the F sharp to B, it really should be Dorian, because that ninth is part of the key, right? So, oh yeah, the other problem too. This 1 to 6 major problem. So in the first bar of the last line in those instances, we've got E to C sharp, C sharp 7. And it is a bit of a problem because F really doesn't exist in the key of E. So you've got to find something that works over that. And you have to think of some way of justifying it. So like what I've written there is Ionian with F in it, so that you can just add the F when you hit the C sharp. Another way of thinking about it would be that the C sharp could be the 5 of F sharp, because the next chord is F sharp minor. So you could think about it in some kind of harmonic minor. Like I quite like, if you're doing in this position, it would be C sharp Phrygian dominant. Some choices from in there would be really good, especially because that's going to include a lot of altered notes, like it's going to include flat 9. And again, the purpose of this is to build tension to get to here, right? So using more tense sounds are going to sound really cool across that C sharp 7. And that's an instance where you really, really have to hit the thing that's changing. You have to hit an F note there. If you don't, it's going to sound odd, very odd that you're kind of ignoring chord scheme. Okay, so what would be a good place for you guys to start working? All right. The whole point of this lesson is driving home approaches to get you through playing some kind of melody over a set of chord changes, right? So probably starting with the 2-string things would be a good idea. So I'm going to give you probably, I don't know, 5 minutes. I want to hear some melodies from each of you on, say, the first 5 changes using the 2-string approach. If you like, you can choose different strings. You don't have to choose the B and G string. But, you know, I've already written out I've written out some of the potential answers you could use. So it might be the easiest thing to do. All right, so yeah, take 5 minutes and come up with something. Anyone got anything yet?
Almost.
Almost. Okay. Change the strings. Intonation is screwed. Alrighty, how about now? Anyone got something? All right, Riley, let's hear it, man.
Okay, just hold on. I've got a loop set up, so I'll just quickly play that.
Oh, man, someone's super organized.
That's all we had to do, correct?
Yeah. Okay, so I think your third phrase was the only thing that kind of let it down a little bit. Could you play those three phrases again?
Okay. Oh. There we go.
Yeah. So that flat 5 on the A minor sounds a little out of place in this instance. It probably wouldn't when you resolve, but I think it would have been cooler if you had have mirrored the A major 7 line. Can you play the A major 7 line just without the track?
The
So that's
that
the
one?
minor 7 line. The line before that. Yeah, so I think you probably would have been better avoiding that. Yeah. Go straight to your third instead. The flat 5, you're really changing the kind of the basic chord type there to a minor major 7. It's a lot of tension to put in. So I mean, you could have justified it potentially by finishing the next line, but at the moment, I'd say that's the one that could be tweaked. So what I would do with you at the moment is play the first two lines identical, and then once you've finished playing those two lines, just stop and listen to whatever comes into your head. Because I don't think that line is what you were hearing over the either A minor major 7. Like, that's pretty spicy. So I would try to mirror probably the A major line. So what you did in the bar before, try to think of a way of doing that, but making it A minor, something closer to A minor major 7 or A minor 7. So you might do like a, right, to resolve out. That way it would tie a little bit more harmonically together. So take a quick stab at that, and like just rewrite the last phrase.
Okay.
Even actually, one thing you could do is it would destroy your loop, I think, unless you've got one of those loopers. You can just delete the last thing you recorded. Is record the first two phrases and listen to them being played back to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then jump in on that last phrase to see if you can find something that, you know, it's that melodic mirroring idea. It either needs to be call and response, or it needs to be some kind of melodic mirroring.
Okay.
Yeah, have a stab. Otherwise, it was actually really cool. Lot of cool movement around. All
Sweet.
right, who's up next? Will, you? All right, Will, let's hear it.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Sorry. Okay. It's sort of half written. I've got an idea of where I want to go, but I'll see if I can pull it off sort of. It's something special, but okay. Yeah, not quite. I didn't quite get what I wanted to do there.
Well, take a second stab.
Okay, yeah.
There's a lot of good things in there. I like you started a motif of this kind of climbing thing.
Yeah, basically I wanted to, and then the third of the B, and then that's almost like right.
Yeah, it sounds like that. It's a flat 9 again.
Yeah. Sort of that.
Yeah, so like the climbing motif was pretty cool. The use of the flat 9, I like, you know, I like it. I think it's a really tense note to resolve to. What did you play after the flat 9? Can you remember?
After the flat 9.
Right.
So and then I'm basically just leaning to the 5.
Yeah, the major 6 and the minor 6 is a cool thing. You know, because you can pick up that you could even do that across all the 3 chords. Right, and get to your C sharp dominant from there. That way it kind of acts as surrounding tones.
Right, okay.
All right. Okay, well, have a couple of cracks on that. See if you can get it to where you're happy with it. That could be an impossible task, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, you know, take a couple of extra stabs, see where you come at it. I did like the climbing motif. I thought the 6s between the minor and the major were really nice and effective. It's a nice simple figure to repeat that really highlights the chord change. So that's, you know, pretty good stuff. All right, Ewan, you're up. What do you got, man?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I don't think it's as good as theirs though. Can you?
I think it's a little further out of your genre than the other two guys.
Yeah, probably, man.
But,
Can you hear my guitar though?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, okay. The only thing that leapt out to me as something that was a little odd was you played a G sharp, I think, against the way it wasn't necessarily even that you were playing the G sharp. It's that you hit it really, really heavily on like a kind of a downbeat. And I think it was against the A major, which sounded quite interesting, but like it's not necessarily a mistake, especially if you're after something that's dissonant. I'd probably try to root that chord. Like I might have, say, played the third and then come back to the major 7, so like you delay it by a beat. One thing I'd suggest though is play less, man.
Yeah. It's an issue. I've always had metal guy,
Yeah. You can see how much of that is kind of metal inspired, which is kind of cool. You had a lot of repeat. Can you just play it again so I can see it again?
The whole thing again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are some really cool resolutions and things. That da 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 kind of stuff that you're doing with the slides is quite a cool way of doing it, kind of intervallic and kind of metally. But first thing I'd suggest, like the melodic mirroring is quite good. So like a lot of your phrases felt like they complemented the next phrase, or when you heard one of the phrases, it's pretty easy for you to predict where the next phrase is going to be. And that's a really important thing in music, right? Like music is about your tonal center playing a game with the thing you're listening to. It's, can I predict what the next bar is going to be? And there are certain tolerances for being surprised in that, right? Like good music, you can predict it, but also seems to surprise you frequently. But it's like it surprises you with a note that you're like, I didn't think of that, but that's great. Where it starts getting weird is if it's all surprises, then quite often people start feeling more and more disconnected with it. Which is one of the reasons why, you have to practice this yourself. And I would start shooting for just making things sound really predictable, which isn't, that inspiring for you as a player, but it teaches you the most important notes to focus around. And then you can add your surprise notes, like your flat 9s, your major minor 7s, or whatever. So, really like the shape and stuff. I'd like you to take another, what time we got? Yeah, we've got time. I'd like to take another stab at it, to do less. Limit yourself to a few different notes. Now, they can be as cool as you want, like they could be like weird intervals. The other things that we haven't really talked about too much are concepts like enclosures. So an enclosure is the idea that we have a target tone. Say E is my target tone. And I'm going to do diatonic enclosures, which means I'm just going to follow the scale. You might do something like this. So you can see how I'm doing an E arpeggio. They're my target tones, and I play one higher, one lower, higher, doesn't matter. Right, or the other way around. And enclosures are really, really great things to think about in your improvisation. Like, well, instead of doing that last note, I could, right? I'm using a couple of notes to announce the arrival of this note, and it's the notes either side. Chromatic enclosures are really common in bebop, so you might get that kind of thing, or just the gypsy jazz one. So they're quite cool to incorporate into your melody and start thinking about too. So whenever you get introduced to one of these new ideas, I always think a great thing to do is try to write a whole thing just using enclosures, right? Like enclosures is the new topic, so. Try to write as much as you can using this idea of using the notes either side of the note you want as well. Alrighty, checking back in with you, Riley. How'd it go, man?
So I changed the last phrase a bit.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of tossing between. The phrase is kind of still the same. I just end on the major 7th. It's just I'm gonna toss it for the note first. So So I go
Much better.
that. So or going to the tonic. So
Yeah, yeah. And in that instance, right, the way you think about it is your little na-na-na, that's your ornament, but the main riff that you're kind of aping is that ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, the arpeggio down. Can you play the whole thing now?
yep. Just play the loop.
Yeah, much better, right? Do we all agree that's much better? Like, I'm not just forcing my taste, right? But like, yeah, much better. That sounded very cohesive and together. And this is the kind of work you want to do when you're working on improvising, right? Always a good idea to kind of record yourself and be like, I like this line and this line, but this went somewhere. And it didn't sound like it fit entirely with the other lines. How could I modify that line? I never do it with recording myself. I probably should, but I'm just too lazy. So I kind of do it on the fly. Like I quite often would like improvise on these changes, but I wouldn't give myself too much of a meter to do it, and I would come up with a line and then intentionally trying to answer that with the next one, and that might require a little bit of figuring out, and then try to work that into something that would be in a meter afterwards. But that's a great example. So now the challenge for you, Riley, which I don't know, you guys have probably got somewhere to be, but the challenge for you to develop that would be to do something brand new. Scrap that whole idea, and you're not allowed to use any of those same ideas. Right?
Okay.
And it's funny, it seems like it's a really difficult thing to do, but it's not. You have so many choices. Best option, just don't start on the same note. You know, like I always think like if I'm doing this, sometimes I'll start on each note of the arpeggio for the first chord. Like, what does it sound like if I start on the fifth? Okay. Or I give myself string limitations. So like we were talking about B string limitations. Great, do it on the D string. You know? And trying to find your way around on that new string will give you a totally different melody. You'll come up with different sounds. You will probably still borrow some of the ideas you like. So you seem to like these kind of like flowing chromatics or like a flowing line into a note. So you probably see that that's going to pop up a lot in your playing. Some things that you might want to investigate a little bit is some intervallics. And sticking with arpeggio tones, if that's a thing that you find in your playing, it's certainly a thing I find in a lot of my playing where like too much widdly woo. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I definitely do. And it's like sometimes I've in recent years I find that like my playing for most of my life has been extremely scalar based. So what I'm really hitting hard is arpeggio based because I don't use enough intervals. So identifying those kind of things in your own playing, where you're like, I really like these like scale runs. It's not throw it out, it's just, okay, but some of my practice now has to be dedicated to not doing that, and that's a rule. I'm not allowed to do that anymore, so how do I find a melody without playing all the notes in between the two destination notes? Yeah? Either way, mate, that was really good. I really like, that was a really cohesive like little melody. Right, Will, did you get yours to a stage where you're happy with it? Or happier with it?
I think I sort of maybe made it more tangible. Just basically mapping out what I was hearing.
Cool, let's hear it.
Sort of just got. If that's annoying, please tell me.
No, that's cool, man. It's a good idea.
Yeah. Something like that. Like there was some sort of closing phrase there where I shouldn't have gone to a major third over a minor chord, but yeah.
Oh, it's just a sharp nine, isn't it? It's a flat nine, sorry. Sharp nine, flat nine, sharp nine. It's a sharp nine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I liked the climb thing that you were doing.
Yeah.
A fun thing to do with that in your own development, just for practice, would be see if you can do that for the whole progression.
Yeah.
Like I sometimes give myself rules like, you know, if I'm reading a chord chart, like all chords have to climb.
Right.
Like for no particular reason other than it gives you the ability to do that. And I always say, we get stuck in static land as guitarists with chords. But if you were playing that kind of stuff where all the lines were climbing, as the rhythm player, I should be doing something that complements that. And one of the things might be that I climb with you, or it might be that I descend against you. So as a rhythm player, I need the freedom to move where I want to move. So that could be some fun things. Definitely hitting a lot of cool chord tones. I think too, you could spend some time doing less.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting exercise to give yourself 2 notes per chord and try to make a melody that works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Focusing on like bare bones.
Yeah.
Especially where you realize that the thing you hear isn't a chord tone at all. It's a note that joins the other 2 notes that were really important. But good stuff, man, as always.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. Thank you.
Okay, so Ewan, did you come up with anything simpler, or is it like it's too much time pressure?
I came up with something a bit simpler.
Okay.
Hold on, I've just lost my plectrum.
Oh no.
There it is. Found it. It's okay.
Well, that's a record.
Yeah, I'm not too confident in it. I definitely do need to practice playing more, I guess. It's similar kind of idea, similar direction.
You mean following chord tones? You mean restricting yourself to 2 strings? What kind of thing?
Playing less notes per beat, I guess.
Yeah.
I internally, I'm never really like satisfied if I linger on one note for too long. It just feels a bit wrong.
Yeah, I mean, look, I totally get where you're coming from, especially under pressure. Like under pressure, I will just start playing faster and faster and faster. Yeah. However, I'd say that even in metal, some of the best points in metal solos are where they stop on a note. I've been doing the wiggly woos for ages, and then there's one note that's like, wow, that just goes so well with what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
So I know jazz isn't all of your guys' things, but the reason I'm choosing it is because I think it's really easy to use some of these extension notes. It gets harder in other styles, but they are equally as appropriate. Especially in metal, like sharp nines and flat nines, things that are really, spiky and dissonant. When you can hit them at the right time.
Metal guys don't often know the theory behind that. They just, tritone because sound evil. But,
yeah. Did everyone watch the Adam Neely thing on the myth of the tritone being banned by the Pope? Yeah. Yeah. He does some good stuff. Okay, yeah. Let's see a simpler idea.
All right, give it a go. All right. So.
Okay, yeah, I like that it's I like how like chord tone driven it is. Like it was really quite tied into the chords. I think you probably could have, again, time pressure and being mean. Probably if you had to put a bit more phrasing into it. So it might be because you're a metal player, but it sounds like all of your pick hits hit very consistently at the same heaviness, the same volume.
Yeah, that's like something I intentionally like practiced early on, like when I was playing guitar to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is true that that like you want to develop having strength, but like I think many of the best tones in the world are made by cranking your amp, cranking your volume, and changing your pick dynamics in every style. It's pretty much the only way of being articulate is to not use maximum volume all the time.
Yeah, I mean, issue is a lot of like super high gain metal tones are just real compressed. So it doesn't really matter what your articulation is.
I mean, that's not necessarily true because you change the bloom in the amp quite a lot by how you hit it,
Yeah.
And especially when a lot of like really top metal players actually don't play with that much gain, like.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. Especially on lead guitar tones, they like to turn the gain down a bit, but
and it's for that articulation, right? It's so that you can get some light and shade, and like I would try experimenting a bit for use particularly. Find a gain sound that you feel is comfortable, it's probably going to be less gain than you used to. But that when you pick really quietly or turn your volume knob down, it either cleans up a lot or goes clean.
Yeah, I'll have to turn my gain down then, because on most of my tones, if I pick too quiet, the noise gate cuts me out.
Right. Yeah. Oh, man, I hate noise gates. I don't know how anyone plays with them.
Well, I wouldn't use it if I didn't need to. I just have a real bad electrical situation.
Yeah. If you're absolutely, when you need to, you need to. I've turned up to a couple of gigs with this thing, right? And this is just a plain old 91 Strat. And Dirty Power near the pokey machines, it's like you can't use anything that's not a hum cancelling position. And it's like, I would have killed for a noise gate at some of those gigs. But for your own development, right? Man, I wish I could remember the name of that dude. I don't know if you ever caught a dude. He's got a weird name like Mishka or something. He draws like little samurai cartoons along with this kind of really art metal playing. I'm gonna have to find him again. His tone is phenomenal, but it's extremely articulate even in that kind of metal-ish tone area.
Wait. So, what do you think his name was?
Something like Mishka, I think.
Misha?
Maybe. He's kind of like one of those dudes that kind of internet famous.
Misha Mansour?
Oh no, I'm going to type in samurai guitar and that's just totally going to turn up for the samurai guitarist. No, not Misha Mansour.
Right. He fit most of that.
Man, I'll see if I can find it over the week to send it to you. I've been
no
meaning
worries.
to try to find this dude again. Yeah, he does this weird cartoon of a dude. It looks a bit like oh man, what's the name of that like metal cartoon? Deathclock. Looks a bit like the Deathclock animations. But he does all the cartooning himself, and he's got, I think it's like a green guitar. I'm gonna have to find him. The cool thing about him particularly is that he's extremely melodic and extremely articulate, and it's still that heavy rock metal kind of zone. And I think we all get a little bit too caught up in the gain war and the compression war, right? Like it is actually a bit of a plague in modern music that you get about 3 decibels of dynamic range across a song. You know, I think we're all getting a little too used to it for one thing, but it's extremely understimulating. You know, if everything is loud, it's just like anything else in music. You can't always do one thing. You've got to add some kind of surprise in it. So if it's all the same volume and it's relentless, it sounds great for 30 seconds on the radio or out of your iPhone speaker, which can't play anything for shit. But it is fatiguing and it's wearing, and it's something that other genres and previous years haven't ever had to really contend with. But it is something, especially now in metal, like some of the Metallica albums have just been like this compressed brick. And it doesn't sound great. Like it tends to rob a bit of the life out of performance. In the same way that like auto-tuning everyone all the time robs the performance of a singer. It's like, yeah, the notes are perfect, but where's the personality? So, okay. All right. Is anyone got anything they want to just quickly run over? So one of the things that actually to get a vibe for what we want to do in the next lesson, right? Do we feel like we need to work on rhythm playing more or lead playing? Or do we want to work more on rhythm playing or lead playing? Anyone got an opinion? Not really? Just kind of like how it comes? All right. Well, I mean, I suppose the lead playing is going to combine more of our ideas. What about song choice? So do we want to do another jazz standard? Should we look at something else, you know, like a Stevie Wonder song or something? Or, yeah, thoughts? Mate, just unmute the fucking mic. I'll get like all sign language for you all.
Yeah, I've no idea, man.
All right. Would it be a problem if we did something jazz standard? Is everyone enjoying the jazz standard as a kind of an approach? Or would you prefer to do something more poppy? Look,
I don't think we mind.
You can't have no opinion, all right? Like some opinion is needed.
You'd be surprised.
Right, like essentially my plans were to hit similar things for the rest of the term, get you guys to do a lot more of this to start finding your way around. I'll see what I come up with for the next one. It could be kind of fun to do something that's in a little bit of a different context. The other thing I'd like to talk about is how to say use your pentatonics to support some of this stuff. Because we're probably all a little more pentatonic, grounded than the other things. All right, so this week, see if it works this week. This week, I'd like you to do more of the same thing, right? Develop an idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be with these chords. It would be good if it was with these chords, because that way it's reusing all of these same concepts. One of the reasons I wanted to get you to map out where some of these changes would be is so that you'd already know where some interesting notes were. For other options too. So maybe take it a step back, maybe take a look again at having a path of triads and then trying to use some of those sounds that you find. Some of those sounds you find to support melodies, try it on different strings, maybe. Like I'm really hammering a lot of the DGB works or GB strings, but that's just so that it's consistent lesson to lesson. You guys should really explore all 6 of these things. But try the constraints thing again. Try it on 2 different strings, right?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I suppose if there ain't no questions, then we might wrap it up there. Remember to hit me up with questions or when you're working on it. Like if I'm free, we can always jump on a video chat and walk through a couple of ideas.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys. Catch you in the next one.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
See you guys.